I just want to make clear the First Amendment shouldn't be a challenge to countering disinformation. And I draw here on the erudition of Justice Brandeis, who told us that.
I didn't understand her to say that it was a challenge to countering disinformation.
I think that the term was biggest challenge.
It's a robust protection of rights that makes it that as we're thinking about addressing disinformation, we have to do it within the context of the First Amendment.
Absolutely, Senator, and if confirmed, that will be my approach. I was quoting Brandeis here, who said the best response, and this is a bit of a paraphrase because I don't have it in front of me, to fraudulent and fallacious information is more speech, not enforced silence. So that will be the approach of public diplomacy if I'm confirmed to this role. And I also thank the Senator for the opportunity to address what the Global Engagement Center did. The Global Engagement Center did foster interagency coordination. That was good.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to America First, the channel where we pull back the curtain on what's really happening in Washington, D.C., and defend the values that made this country great. If you stand for freedom, truth, and putting America first, do me a favor, like, subscribe, and hit that bell so you never miss an episode. We're building a community of proud Americans, and your support means everything. Today, I'm diving into a revealing exchange from a Senate hearing featuring Democrat Senator Jeanne Shaheen and President Trump's State Department nominee, Ms. Rogers. The left-wing media is spinning this as some kind of gotcha moment, but if you look beyond the headlines, you'll see it's actually a window into how the left thinks about free speech, government power, and America's role in the world. Let's break it all down.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Rogers, I want to go back to your conversation about soft power. And you quoted NPR CEO Catherine Mahar. I'm a big fan of NPR. I think it does wonderful work. I think you neglected to provide the context for that quote. It was actually at the Atlantic Council's 360 Open Summit, which was a conference about tackling foreign disinformation, where Mahar, who was not at that time the CEO of NPR, she was the CEO of Wikimedia. She discussed efforts to push back against disinformation, and her direct quote in response to the question of how to address foreign disinformation was, and I'm quoting, "The number one challenge that we see is, of course, the First Amendment in the United States. It is a robust protection of rights, and that is a protection of rights both for platforms, which I actually think is very important that platforms have those rights to be able to regulate what kind of content they want on their sites." She then said, "This makes it a little tricky to address some of the real challenges of where bad information comes from." So I just think it's important to correct the record on that issue. But I also want to ask you about the role of the State Department and the role that you would assume, if confirmed, to address interagency coordination on disinformation. And I share your belief that it's a critical tool of our soft power. And I also agree with you about American access and innovation. I think when people have a chance to partner with the United States versus partnering with China, they're going to choose America every time. But if we don't have an apparatus which we can use to show what America's access and innovation is all about, then it's going to be really hard to get that message across to foreign governments. And that's sadly where we are, as Senator Kaine pointed out. The dismantling of the U.S. Agency for Global Media, of the Global Engagement Center at the State Department, put us at a disadvantage when it comes to foreign governments. We had a hearing in this committee at the beginning of the year where the experts testified that China is spending over $1 billion, billion with a B, a year on disinformation and misinformation campaigns across the world. And we no longer have an apparatus to address that. You also, your role is, historically, the Undersecretary for Public Diplomacy and Public Affairs has represented the Secretary of State on the International Broadcasting Advisory Board, which I know you're familiar with. That's been a body that's been committed to protecting the editorial independence of U.S. Agency for Global Media networks and entities. So if we don't have that apparatus, how do you address that soft power need that I think we have in the United States to let the rest of the world know why it's important to partner with us?
Thank you, Senator, for that question and for supplementing the record regarding the purported challenge posed by the First Amendment to countering disinformation. I just want to make clear the First Amendment shouldn't be a challenge to countering disinformation. And I draw here on the erudition of Justice Brandeis, who told us that.
I didn't understand her to say that it was a challenge to countering disinformation.
I think that the term was biggest challenge.
It's a robust protection of rights that makes it that as we're thinking about addressing disinformation, we have to do it within the context of the First Amendment.
Absolutely, Senator, and if confirmed, that will be my approach. I was quoting Brandeis here, who's had the best response, and this is a bit of a paraphrase because I don't have it in front of me, to fraudulent and fallacious information is more speech, not enforced silence. So that will be the approach of public diplomacy if I'm confirmed to this role. And I also thank the Senator for the opportunity to address what the Global Engagement Center did. The Global Engagement Center did foster interagency coordination. That was good. And if I'm confirmed, I'll do that. And the global...
But that's my question, really, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but how will you do it if it's been dismantled? How will you do it if we no longer have Radio Free Asia, Radio Marti, the infrastructure to get out information to combat our adversaries?
So just to distinguish briefly, I think if I were confirmed, my function, public diplomacy, never had AGM under it, although the Senator is absolutely correct. I could serve on the board of AGM, which would be a separate agency. But we have thousands of social media channels that the public diplomacy function manages. We have assets in every regional bureau of the State Department, partnerships with influencers and creators. There are many, many outlets with which we can engage. And I think the media landscape has changed seismically as the 2024 election cycle showed us. 2 hours on a podcast might reach more people than a week of appearances on legacy marquee media cable shows. So I just think we need to be agile and creative. And I think to the extent that we're spending money on this media outreach, we just need to make sure, and I think the department is developing great metrics and tools to do this, make sure that every dollar we spend has an impact on the target audience. And we have metrics we can use to measure these things, to stay accountable to the American taxpayer and accountable to the imperative that each dollar we spend makes America safer, stronger, and more prosperous. And the fact that the Global Engagement Center engaged with other agencies, that was great, and I'll engage with other agencies. I don't need the GEC to do that. The fact that the Global Engagement Center purported to address foreign propaganda and lies, that was meritorious, and I don't need the Global Engagement Center to do that. With the Global
you need an
Engagement
apparatus
Center,
to do that, though, and in fact, your role did have the Global Engagement Center and all of public diplomacy under it. So I appreciate your intent, and I agree with that. I think it shows a tremendous amount of naivete to think that we can do that without having an apparatus to actually get the information out there. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
First, let's set the scene. Jeanne Shaheen is a senior Democrat senator from New Hampshire. She's been in the swamp for decades and never misses an opportunity to argue for more government control, especially when it comes to the flow of information. Ms. Rogers, President Trump's nominee for a key State Department post, was being grilled about her views on soft power. That's D.C. speak for how we influence foreign countries through culture, media, and diplomacy rather than military force. In this hearing, Rogers quoted Catherine Marr, who is now the CEO of NPR, but at the time was in charge of the Wikimedia Foundation. The quote was about the First Amendment making it tricky to combat foreign disinformation. That's when Senator Shaheen pounced. She accused Rogers of taking Marr's words out of context and tried to clarify that Marr was talking about the complexity of protecting free speech while dealing with propaganda. But here's the thing, folks. Whether you're running NPR or Wikipedia, the worldview is the same. They see the First Amendment as an obstacle, not a shield, for the American people. They want to regulate speech in the name of fighting fake news, and that's dangerous territory. Shaheen's next move was to lament the dismantling of government agencies like the Global Engagement Center and the U.S. Agency for Global Media. For decades, these agencies have pumped out taxpayer-funded content that's supposed to inform the world about America. But too often, these government megaphones end up parroting the establishment narrative, pushing globalist values, and sometimes even undermining the America First message. Let's not forget, President Trump saw through the bloated bureaucracy of these agencies and took steps to rein them in. The left hated that because they believe only government can properly communicate America's story. But ask yourself, patriots, when was the last time you heard something truly pro-American from Voice of America or Radio Free Asia? Too often, these outlets sound more like CNN than a beacon of freedom. Now, Shaheen argues that China is spending more than $1 billion a year on propaganda, and that we're at a disadvantage because we don't have a similar apparatus. But here's the truth, we're not China. We don't need a ministry of truth. Our strength comes from the free exchange of ideas, not government-run media. Let's talk about this buzzword, disinformation. The left uses it to justify censorship and control. They say it's about national security, but what they really want is to silence dissent and label anything they disagree with as misinformation. We saw this playbook during COVID with the Hunter Biden laptop story and with countless other examples where the official narrative turned out to be false, or, at the very least, highly debatable. Senator Shaheen claimed that without a centralized government agency, America can't push back against Chinese or Russian propaganda. But patriots, the American people don't need bureaucrats to tell us what's true. We need transparency, accountability, and open debate. The First Amendment is our best defense against tyranny, whether it comes from Beijing or from Washington, D.C. Now, let's give Ms. Rogers some credit. She pushed back against Shaheen's doom and gloom narrative. She pointed out that the State Department still has thousands of social media channels, regional offices, and partnerships with influencers that can reach global audiences. She recognized that media today isn't limited to radio stations and cable news. It's podcasts, YouTube, Twitter, and independent creators. She also quoted Justice Brandeis, one of the great defenders of free speech, saying that the answer to bad speech is more speech, not enforced silence. That's the American way. Rogers promised that, if confirmed, she'll focus on agility, creativity, and accountability, making sure every dollar spent on outreach actually works. She committed to working with other agencies, even without the now-defunct GEC. That's leadership. Let's get real. America's strength isn't in our government media budget. It's in our ideas. Freedom, opportunity, innovation. These are the values that inspire the world. We don't need to copy China's playbook. We need to double down on what makes us unique. The left's answer to every problem is more government, more spending, more central control. But that's not what built this country. Our founders knew the dangers of concentrated power, which is why they enshrined the First Amendment, the same First Amendment the left now calls a challenge to their agenda. The solution to foreign propaganda isn't to become propagandists ourselves. It's to unleash American creativity, empower independent voices, and trust the people, not the bureaucrats, to choose what's true. So let me ask you, patriots, do you trust the government to decide what's true and what's not? Or do you believe, like I do, that the American people, with access to all the information, can make up their own minds? Senator Shaheen and her friends want to rebuild the very government apparatus that failed us for decades. They want to silence dissent in the name of protecting us. We can't let that happen. If you believe in free speech, individual liberty, and putting America first, then stand with me. Like this video, subscribe to our channel, and share it with everyone you know. Drop a comment below. Do you think the First Amendment is a challenge, or is it our greatest weapon against tyranny? Let's keep this conversation going. Support independent creators, demand accountability, and never, ever give up your right to speak freely. That's how we keep America strong. Thank you for tuning in to America First. Stay vigilant, stay vocal, and God bless the United States of America.